Okay, so I think we're ready to go. Welcome everyone. Welcome to my monthly YouTube live stream. It's part of the offering of my Yoga Wisdom membership that meets once a month for a 90-minute live class. This month's topic is 3 yoga tips to avoid back pain. So this happens to be right in my wheelhouse, so I'm really happy to share it with you. So whether you've had an old injury, you have some sort of chronic tension from overuse, or some habitual stress that you're dealing with, I think you'll find the reflections today a contribution to your practice. So we do yoga because we want to change ourselves from the inside out. And to do that, we have to start by listening to our body-mind. And I say that because the body and the mind are not at all separate. And that's part of the journey of getting to know yourself, what your body needs, and to have that reflection on your psyche as to what your psyche needs for your own healing and your own evolution on your journey. So today I promise to talk about 3 things. I promise to talk about short psoas versus weak abdominals, the contrast of a spine that slumps too much or lifts too much, meaning too much overwork or overuse from lifting, bending and lifting, and then talking a little bit about hamstrings being long or short. And while I believe my camera picked up the sounds just fine, it'll be better now that I have the earbuds in. All right, so how to remember to do this. It's been a month of being away, so I'm happy to be back and speaking with you all here today. So the first thing let's talk about is the psoas muscle. So the psoas muscle is typically too contracted, not always, but often. And the reason is that as the deepest abdominal muscle and as the anterior support for the spine, it tones automatically. You don't have to think about toning your psoas muscle. All you have to do is walk, move, do a little yoga. The psoas muscle is toning because it's helping to support your spine. Typically what happens is the psoas gets a little too short or too contracted, which will tend to give a person a sway back or an uneven pull in their spine. And the opposite side of that is that the abdominals actually become weak, meaning the transverse abdominis, the one that goes across the bottom of your belly, and I just realized I needed to do something else. Okay, so the transverse abdominis that goes across the belly is considered the girdle muscle or the coughing muscle. So it's the muscle that goes all the way around, that when you cough, you contract your lower abdomen when you're coughing. And another thing that we do sometimes with our voice is go ahead and make a sound, such as psst, P-S-S-S-T. And what that sound's going to help do is it's going to help you psst, connect with the contraction of those lower abdominal muscles, which is important for our practice. And I need to sit down so you can see my face. So we want to tone the transverse abdominis while keeping the psoas as steady and neutral as possible. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and do a couple simple poses here today for that. The other thing I want to talk about is slumping and lifting. So if I'm sitting at the desk a lot, I'm going to slump by dropping my chest. And that's going to weaken the fascia in my upper and middle back. And then I stand up and it's like, oh, my back's aching. Why is it aching? It's a message from your body that says it's aching because it's tired of being stretched. And the same thing occurs in the lower back sometimes. So if you're doing a lot of lifting, like a lot of gardening work, and you're bending down and lifting and bending and lifting, the lower back is going to complain for the same reason. So what that's giving us a clue about is that we need to have both anterior tone and posterior tone. So we have to tone the back body as well as the front body in order to have balance in our spine and be pain-free, to not wear it out one way or the other. And then the third thing we're going to talk about is hamstrings, whether they're long or short. So someone who does a lot of vinyasa practice will tend to have hamstrings that are way too long. And what happens in that case is that the pelvis, posterior pelvis and posterior lumbar, become unstable because they also become too long. The fascia gets too extended, too lengthened, and there's not enough contractile ability to support the spine. Conversely to that, if somebody had very short hamstrings, say you were working in the garden all day and your hamstrings are really short, then you'd still be weakening the low back, but for a different reason, because you'd be bending from your spine rather than bending from the hips. So I hope, again, this kind of brings to the foreground that it's about harmony and balance in the body that makes the body function properly. And so that's what we're going to kind of look at, those three things today in this class. And I do want to mention right now that in the notes below, you're going to find a free gift, and that free gift is for my 5-day psoas training. If you haven't ever claimed that, you can claim it by going to the notes below. And that's going to really take you into a deeper understanding of your psoas muscle. In this class, I'm just going to touch on it, but you can also have that as a resource, as well as checking out my Yoga Wisdom membership. Okay, very good. So I'm going to go to the mat. What you're going to need today on your mat is you're going to need a blanket, a block, maybe a bolster if you have one, a folding chair, and for the people who are staying on for the membership class, we'll also use a strap at some point in the membership class. So let's go ahead and go to the mat. And I'm going to just move my bolster aside, and I want you all to join me lying flat on your back. And so go ahead and lie down on your mat, and let me talk to you for a moment about that. The reason why I love lying down on the floor is because the floor gives me feedback and tells me what my spine is doing. So if you think about it, the only time you ever see your back body is if somebody takes a picture of you from the back and shows it to you, or you go and look in a three-way mirror. And then you can say, oh, look, is that what my shoulders look like? Oh, isn't that interesting? So we can't see the back side of our body. We have to feel and sense it. And so the floor is a wonderful way to begin to sense your back body. So when you first lie down on the floor, just feel into, how is my spine? How is it resting on the floor? And I'm going to go ahead and join you on the mat. So starting with your knees bent and feet on the floor is always nice. And just notice if you're even on both sides of your pelvis. You can rock your pelvis a little side to side. And when you do that, I'm going to assume that you're rocking across the midpoint of your sacrum and that your lumbar spine is not in contact with the floor. So you have a natural arch in your lower back. And then just feel for your shoulders. Where are the shoulder blades? Is one shoulder blade touching and the other one not touching? Do you feel equal length from your hip bones up to your side ribs? Just kind of get a feeling for your spine, and then check out your neck. Just turn your head gently from one side to the other and feel for any tension in the neck. And you might notice that the neck doesn't stop at the top of your shoulder. The neck stops at a point at the bottom edge of your shoulder blade. And if you look at your anatomy, you'll see that your anatomy will confirm that the muscles of the neck end much lower than people tend to think. And then stretching your legs out flat. Again, notice the pelvis. And then bring your feet feet to Tadasana. So feet come together, heels drop down, thighs press down, toes reach up. And when you press your thighs toward the floor, notice how the lumbar spine becomes lighter. And then go ahead and start with alternate knee to chest. Just grab onto the knee and really bring it toward your armpit. So think of not coming to the center of your chest, but coming off center toward your shoulder, just to get the hip joint to flex a little bit, and then change. And observe the movement of one hip compared to the other. And also observe if you can keep the leg that's on the ground grounded, meaning it's not going to follow the bending knee. So let the knee bend, but don't let the opposite leg follow. And then change again. Some of you are familiar with my terminology about the clock face, keeping 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock. That's your right and left hip bone, keeping them parallel with each other so that you prevent the hip from riding up on one side or the other. In essence, keeping equal length on both sides of your lumbar spine. So this time we're going to bring it up a little bit, and I want you to do some curls. So we're going to inhale, raise the arms overhead, and then exhale, curl up, grab the knee, bring it in toward your chest, head toward the knee, knee toward the head, and then inhale, arms up, and exhale, opposite leg, head to knee, knee to head, inhale, arms up, exhale, curl, inhale, arms up, exhale, curl, inhale, arms up. We're going to do a couple more. Exhale, curl. So this is both psoas and some of the abdominal muscles. And inhale, last one. Curl up. And then rest. Stretch the arms overhead. Lengthen your heels away. Lengthen your arms away. And extend your spine. Pause there. Take a few smooth breaths. Expanding the diaphragm. Expanding the solar plexus. All right, and this time we're going to add resistance. So I'm going to grab onto my right knee. I'm going to push my knee away from my chest. In essence, think about grounding 6 o'clock. That's your inner groin. So drop your inner groin so the lumbar has an arc. Inhale. And as you exhale, curl the head and chest toward the knee, but keep the knee pressing into the hands so it feels like it's almost pulling you up. Yes? And then inhale, and as you exhale, make that sound we did before. Psss, and lift the other leg 6 inches off the floor, maybe 10 inches off the floor, maybe 12, depending on who you are. And keep the transverse abdominis contracted. So the belly stays in. And then release, and extend your arms overhead. Deep inhalation, smooth exhalation. And then we'll go to side 2, grabbing onto the opposite knee. Press the knee into your hands. Really push it away. Drop your inner groins. Press the opposite thigh onto the floor. And then curl your head and chest up. Keep the knee pressing away. My elbows are lifted. My shoulders are dropped away from my ears. And then with an exhale, make the sound. Pull the lower belly in. And lift the straight leg and hold it. So I'm up about, looks like I'm up about 10 inches. You're going to feel that this is a weight load. You're contracting your psoas and the transverse abdominis. And then slowly release. Drop the head, stretch your arms, take a breath. Smooth inhalation again. Correct the position of your spine on the floor. And observe, let the floor give you feedback. Observe what changed Observe if one side became shorter than the other, because this is something you're looking for balance and harmony between the two sides. All right. And now we're going to move on to what's called traction twist. So I'm going to bend my knees, place my feet on the floor, and then separate my feet to the sides of my mat. And I'm going to drop both knees to the right. My left hip rises up slightly off the floor. And be aware now where you're opening. You want to open right at the crease at the top of the thigh. So you want the thigh to stretch toward the knee and the belly to pull in and up toward the ribs. And you do that not so much by hardening the belly as you do by curling the tail in and reaching with the knee. So you're trying to think about taking this left side of your sacrum deep in. And then draw the belly in and up and reach out with your left arm. And nice smooth breath in and out. And then inhale, come back up to center. Pause a moment. Reposition. If you need to rock your pelvis a little bit to get it to neutral, please do so. And then we'll drop to the second side. So we're going to drop the knees to the left. And again, open the joint at the front of the hip. So extending the thigh in one direction and the belly in the opposite direction by curling the tail in and reaching out through the knee. And then fold the belly in and turn and reach out with your right arm. You let your head go to the right. And nice smooth inhalation, smooth exhalation. And then inhale and up you come to center. And I know that feels really lovely. It's called traction twist because let's do it again. Let's do it again. Drop your knees to the right. Extend the left knee, curl the tail in. Draw the bottom of the belly in and up toward the side ribs. And it's called traction twist because it's lengthening the psoas, which means on one side at a time, which means that it's gapping the spaces between the vertebra and between the facet joints. And so it feels very nice. It's helping create length in the lower back. So especially if you've been doing some lifting, that will be really nice to get some relief. And come back to center, and we'll do the second side. Drop the knees. Extend into the right knee, curl the tail in. Draw the bottom of the belly in and up toward the bottom right ribs. And again, any of these poses, this pose sometimes is challenging for people's knees. And I'm not going to go into the variations in this class, but if it's challenging to your knee, you can always put a block under the knee, or you can do a variation for the psoas release by claiming your free 5-day psoas training from the show notes below. All right, and inhale back up again to center. And pause a moment, and then let's just do a neutral pelvic rock. So drop your inner groin so the spine arches, and then lightly curl your tail, softening the belly, not hardening, but softening. Drop your inner groin and curl your tail. And now we're going to go to a pelvic lift. So with your feet hips width apart, drop your inner groin, take an inhale. As you exhale, curl your tail and lift your hips up, probably halfway. What I want you to be aware of for whoever's watching is that you're using the juncture of your hamstring to your buttocks, not your lumbar. So that means I'm going to sink my heels into the floor and lift the center of my sacrum up toward the ceiling. See how far up it goes without any discomfort or tightening in the spine. And then if you can go part way up, hold it a little bit, feel for each cheek, each butt cheek, and see if they're equally contracting and lifting you. So you want to let that work a little bit, and then exhale, and down you come. And then inhale, drop your inner groins, releasing the psoas, releasing the buttocks, curl. Inhale, drop. You're dropping 6 o'clock, arching the back a little bit, and then curling the tail. Next time you do, let's go up again. Curl the tail and up you go. And you can stop at any point, work on sinking the heels and lifting the middle of the sacrum. And then if you want to go further because you have a regular practice, grab onto the sides of your mat, tuck your right shoulder under, tuck your left shoulder under, and then press the heels down, drive your sacrum up, and open your chest. Let your chest come towards your chin, and hold it, and feel the power of the hamstring, the power of your glutes, holding you up. Soft belly. That's a nice open psoas right there. Quads and psoas. And then release the shoulders and slowly come back down. Return your hips to the floor. Let your spine return to its nice natural length. Lightly tip your head from one side to the other. All right, and let's roll over to your right side and slowly push yourself up to sitting. So those are important poses to help warm up your psoas and tone the front body, and then a little bit of tone also on the back body. So now I want to take you up to standing. And in this standing position, one of the key poses standing would be Utkatasana, chair pose. And I suggest people do it with a block between their knees. And I'll tell you why, because often people do Utkatasana and they overarch their lower back, shorten their psoas, and destabilize their pelvic floor. And I don't want any of those things for you. I want you to have a better practice than that, and a more balanced practice. So I'm going to hold the block between my knees, and I'm going to lift the bottom of my belly and flatten my clock face, and I'll turn sideways for you. So I drop my tail, lift the bottom of the belly, flatten the clock face, and then I'll start to sit. So I'm going to bend the knees, and my butt is going to travel back a little bit, but not too far. So I don't want to throw my tail out and overarch my back. I want to just go down a little bit, and then we're going to squeeze the block with the knees, lift the corners of the pubic bone up, and wrap the flesh of the thighs around underneath you. And then you can either take your arms straight forward or take them all the way up. But you're making a chair with your hamstring muscles. So you're making your own chair. And then inhale and up you come. It's always fun to try and talk through these poses. So I have to just modify a little bit. Now another way to do this pose, especially if your back was bothering you, and I have a little YouTube clip about this as well. I'm going to be making a little sequence in playlist in YouTube for y'all to watch. But you come with your back to the wall and drop your tail, bring the middle of your sacrum against the wall, bring the middle of your sacrum against the wall, and just do a partial sit. And so again, the wall is there because it's giving you feedback as to how your sacrum is, how your hips are. And then go ahead and squeeze the block, lift the corners of the pubis, put weight to the outside edge of your foot, but tweeze your sits bones under you and see if you can feel how you're catching the muscles underneath in your pelvic floor and your lower abdomen. And pause, take a breath. You can also use the sound, and I'll demonstrate that for you in just a moment. You can also use the sound to help access your transverse abdominis. You have to access your transverse abdominis. So that's going to help. I'm going to come down. I'm going to squeeze a little bit, lift the pubis, take a breath in, let my belly relax as I inhale. And make the sound squeezing in and tweezing in. So both of those two things to help tone the lower abdomen, the pelvic floor, and make you stronger at your base. Okay, now we're going to move on to the hamstrings for a minute. So the hamstring piece, and I'm going to use the chair for this, is that we want to know the difference between when we're just collapsing our spine and when we're extending. And if you want to really protect and avoid injuring your back, you want to say, how much am I collapsing and rounding forward? How many hours do I spend slumping at the desk? How many hours do I spend lifting and bending and squatting in the garden where my spine is rounded? And so when you stretch your hamstring, you don't want to mess up the spine any more than it already might be. So I'm going to take a step forward, face my hips toward the chair, weight to the outside edge of my rear foot, inside edge of my front foot. I'm going to firm my quads, pull up on the quads, lift the bottom of the belly, drop my tail, and then hinge as if there were a bar across the front of my pelvis. Top thigh is going to hinge forward and take my fingertips to the chair. And in this position, I know that my back is neutral. Right, my back is neutral. And lift the inner ankle of your back foot, bring weight to the outside edge of the foot, rear foot, inside edge of the front foot. And elongate through the front of your spine. And to help you elongate, you can actually take your hands to the back of the chair. Reach out and let your arms extend. So as I'm reaching forward with my fingers, I'm pressing my top thighs back. And I'm getting a nice long extension, keeping my spine very neutral. So it depends on the length of your hamstrings, how far forward you go. But I will tell you that my hamstrings are not that short. My calves are a little short, but my hamstrings are not that short. So if I wanted to, I could come all the way down and put my head on the chair. And now I feel a good hamstring stretch, but I don't feel any discomfort in my spine, even though my spine is lightly rounded forward. So you have to know your body a little bit, but if you have any kind of disc fatigue, strong fatigue, or typical pain in your back, you're better off keeping your hands elevated so that you get a nice extension through the front of the spine. It encourages that. You could even, for a very short hamstring person, put your hands up on a wall. Okay? So there's lots of ways to do that. Let's do the second side. Weight to the outside edge of the rear foot, inside edge of the front foot. Lift the bottom of the belly, drop the tail. Turn your hips toward the chair any amount and hinge forward. You can start by taking your fingertips to the chair or reaching your hands out onto the back of the chair. And in my book, as a yoga practitioner and a yoga teacher, I like to practice different ways. I like to practice all the ways so that I can find different areas of my body and make them more conscious. So I'm inviting you to try, if you've never tried it, with your hands on the back of the chair, and see what happens. Again, smooth breath through the nose. And if you want to come all the way down with the forehead, come all the way down. And then inhale, raise the head and chest up, and step out of the pose. Pause a moment, and then we'll remove the chair. And take a hold of your blanket. And so I have a narrow folded blanket. This works pretty well for most people. Just a little lift under the pelvis. And as we do this, if you find any discomfort in your low back, then you can always use a bolster. So the people who are watching on YouTube, this is one height. You can go higher up and it makes a little less strain in the lumbar spine. Okay, so I'm going to put it across the middle and we're going to work on posterior tone. So we did some work with anterior tone, pelvic floor tone, and now let's do a little bit of posterior tone. And I say tone are the three keys, the three important tips to keep your back happy and avoid back pain, because muscles contract naturally. That's what a muscle does. If I reach my arm out and I pull something toward me, it comes toward me because my bicep muscle contracted. That's the easy thing for the body to do. The hard thing for the body to do is to reach and stretch. It requires, physiologically it's true, it requires more energy to stretch a muscle than it does to contract a muscle. So when you wake up your muscles, wake up your nervous system, and say, okay, we're ready to do some garden work or lifting, whatever, your body will be happy. So let's go ahead. I'm talking too much today. Let's come down on our bellies. You can watch for a moment if you'd like. Hands right beside the breastbone. Belly nice and long. I'm going to start by curling my toes under, lifting my knees up off the floor and really extending back through my knees. And then I'm going to squeeze the tip of my tail down, press my pelvis into the blanket. From here, I'm going to lengthen my belly as I inhale, rolling my shoulders back. And keep my floating ribs on the floor and just start with a real tiny lift. The key here is to firm the buttocks. So squeeze the tail down as the thighs go up, and then hold it. It's a backward sit up, and then come down and rest. So we'll do that 2-3 times, and I'll add a few variations as we go along, so you can follow along if you'd like. So again, I'm going to lift my inner knee, squeeze my tail down, anchor the tail, firm the back body, roll my shoulders back, part way up, curl and hold, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, and come down, take a breath, lift, squeeze, curl, roll up, and hold it, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and come down. And this next time we go up, we're going to lift. I'm going to invite you to lift your hands off the floor. So lift the inner thighs, squeeze the tail down, roll your shoulders back, lift part way up, and then take your palms off the mat, just an inch. Hold it. Feel the shoulder blades pulling down away from your ears. Stretch back with your heels. Firm the buttocks. And down you come. Smooth inhalation and exhalation. So a good practice of that pose would mean that the contraction of the musculature and the fascia of the back body would be evenly distributed through the whole spine. So if you feel it just in one spot very strongly, then don't lift as high and think of stretching your chest forward. So a classical instruction for this pose is to roll the shoulders back and then pull the elbows toward the heels as the chest protrudes forward. So you can work that way to get that length out of the lower back so you don't strain in any one particular vertebra. All right, now we're going to go to the next one. We're going to do the legs only. And I'm going to take my legs wide apart to the edges of my mat and turn my toes in. So I'm trying to make an A-frame with my legs. And I'm going to slide my hands under the front of my hips. So just below the hip bone for some support. I'm going to lift the knees again, squeeze the tail down, and notice what happens. See if you can get the tip of your tailbone right down in the center, and then lift both feet off the floor. And you're going to find your head wants to lift also. Just gently broaden your collarbones. You're not lifting high with your head. You're working with the legs. And hold it. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And down you come. Last month we did a course on the asymmetric pelvis. And so if you know you have one side that's a little weaker than the other, and you might feel that because you might feel a little more trembling on that side, Then you can lift the knees again, squeeze the tail down, and lift just that one leg slightly off the floor, and then lift the other. So you give the weaker side a chance to catch up to the stronger side. And then down you come. Place your hands beside your chest, push yourself up, open the knees out to the side, and come back into an extended child's pose. And allow your breath to smooth out and your spine to relax. Okay, so again, thank you for joining me for this short little snippet of thinking about your body in a different way for back care. And again, there's a free gift for you, the psoas training in the show notes below. And check out the membership, subscribe to the channel, blah, blah, blah. All right, have a wonderful evening, everyone on YouTube. Thank you for joining me. Namaste.